Well, on today's show, we're going to talk about an issue for a few minutes with our guest that we really haven't touched upon. And if this today would have been the topic in September, I would have said we're too early on this issue. And we're talking about the Florida governor's race, Lindsey Randall, and you've got Byron Donalds, who is the front runner right now. Doesn't look like Casey DeSantis isn't going to run. We're going in the month of May. So you got a primary, 3 months away. You got House Speaker Paul Renner. You got the Lieutenant Governor, Jay Collins, James Fishback. I guess those are the only four on paper that really mean anything. Bobby Williams, the rest of these guys. I'm like, who? But we haven't talked about this, Lindsey, at all about the gubernatorial race.
And this is a big deal. I mean, we've had the most amazing governor for the past 8 years. And so this is new territory for all Floridians, especially the Floridian transplants that came here because of DeSantis. But I feel like there's so many other things that have been going on in our state and also just around the world that we just really haven't been focusing on this. But we need to. It's important.
Well, again, Lindsey Randall, I think the gas prices are going to play a part here in the state of Florida when it comes to, I mean, if gas prices are still $3.50, $4 a gallon, and I know it's the month of May, but if it's still high enough going to the Republican primary, or even going in November, do the Democrats have a chance? So we'll get into all of this. I got a bunch of clips I want to play here. Not a bunch, but I got a few clips. So let's bring in our panel discussion of who we've got. So Matt Caldwell, you'll see, is a former Florida state rep, elected official down in Lee County, is also on the talk radio circuit. He comes on our radio show once a week, sometimes even co-host as well. And then, of course, I want to bring in also another Matt, NewSouthPolitics.com editor Matt O'Hearn, who's been on with me for many years. So let me start with you, Matt Caldwell. Indiana, which is a 15-plus red state for the Republicans for Trump. Trump doesn't like the redistricting. Republicans said, go pound sand. You're going to cause our districts to become more moderate. Democrats might have a chance. Trump doesn't like it. So he primaries practically every one of them and he wins. I get that. General election, let's see what happens. But with what happened in the primary in Indiana, I think some would say that this would probably guarantee a win for Congressman Byron Donalds, who's late in all the polls, for an August primary here in Florida, Matt Caldwell.
Yeah, I don't see any sign that the Donald Trump candidate that's endorsed, particularly in Florida, is going to be at risk, right? This is the person that the Republican voters are looking towards. The person that's got Donald Trump's endorsement is going to win. And you put that on top of Byron's work for his own candidacy. I mean, we don't want to undersell it. But even though he's been the presumed front runner for months now, he's still out working just like a candidate should, going to events 7 days a week, up and down the state, campaigning in every single corner. And I think those two things combined really makes it impossible to envision anything but a victory for him as we sit here today.
All right, Matt O'Hearn, let's get to the clips. I got several of these I want to play. Here are some of the latest polling in the good. Now, the Democrats we can talk about if we even get to it today. I want to talk about the Republicans. Fox News' latest polling shows that Donalds is leading in the GOP primary.
A public opinion research lab poll from the University of North Florida finds Byron Donalds leading the race for the Republican nominee for governor. Donalds polled 28% to Casey DeSantis at 24%, with a hefty 36% of voters undecided in the.
You know, set aside Casey here, Matt. I mean, the biggest group in some of these polls has been the term undecided. I wonder if Collins or Renner got out of the race. I don't know. We can talk about Fishback in a moment. He's saying some pretty interesting things about Donalds. But, you know, if Collins got an endorsement of Renner, or not even endorsement, one of those two dropped out, I think the race would be a little closer. But is it just pretty much of a foregone conclusion Byron's is going to be the guy, Byron Donalds, for the Republicans in August, going into November?
Sure. And I don't mind talking about the primary, but what I want to say is that winning the primary battle by getting Trump's support, I think is actually going to lead to possibly, in some cases, losing the war. I do think Donalds will be our next governor, but I don't see him winning by more than 5%. It won't be anything close to DeSantis's margin. And I have some reasons for that I could get into, but It just depends on how deep you want to go into the to the general. That stat, I was going to say that stat though of undecided. Look, I think that is representative of a lot of the electorate as a whole. I'm not going to beat around the bush with this. I know there's probably everyone else on here is a pretty big fan of Trump. I don't care what poll you look at or if you even believe in polls. There's nothing to convince me that he's anywhere close, Trump's anywhere close, or his endorsed candidates like Donalds by association, anywhere close to 50% with independents. And some of that spills over, I think, into the Republican primary side. Now, Donalds will probably win the Republican primary comfortably. But even then, if you go outside the MAGA voting bloc, some of the never Trumpers out there, this is finally their chance to detach. And even some of the most MAGA loyalists are simply just fed up with certain things like the Iran war. If I were the Republican Party right now, I would be extremely concerned, even in some places in Florida, about the next 6 months.
Everybody, Lindsey, always talks about Republicans versus Democrat, how well and big of a number it's increased under Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. But what everybody seems to forget, Matt kind of alluded to it a few moments ago, are independents. We saw these two South Florida races down in Tampa and down in the Mar-a-Lago, which normally lean Republican, where even 6 to 11% of the Republicans here, Lindsey, went to vote for the Democrats. Independents, by an overwhelming majority, went along with the Democrats. Now, I'm kind of like with Matt here. I think Byron's probably still going to win the gubernatorial race. 5 points? Okay, that's still a victory compared to somebody like David Jolly. But again, the Trump endorsement seems to be handed pretty well in some of these GOP primaries.
Yeah, I mean, Donalds reportedly raised $22 million, like very, very early. But regardless, he's raised a lot of money already. We know that these races are huge. The Trump endorsement was huge. I think he will be the next governor. However, I do think that endorsement with Trump is slowly decaying that popularity. I think Trump is he's on a slippery slope right now with a lot of MAGA like supporters. And I think that that's going to hurt him. And that's why I do agree, Matt O'Hearn, that you are right in saying that he will win, but it's not going to be near as much as the victory that we saw with DeSantis' second term.
Go ahead, Matt.
Honestly, I think that if I like to say that the Florida Democrats are their own worst enemy. The only more incompetent leadership in Florida is the Orlando Magic's front office. If they were to put up an exciting candidate or someone who related better to voters, I actually think Congressman Jared Moskowitz would beat Donalds by 10 points. And the reason I say that is because he has a record of leading Florida during crisis. He worked with DeSantis in a bipartisan matter. He was down in Parkland and worked with Rick Scott.
Right. I get the resume.
So what I'm getting at is the Florida GOP is extremely lucky that Florida Dems are as dysfunctional as they are, because if they weren't, I think Donalds would be in much bigger trouble. And if you think back to the first time DeSantis ran, okay, I was one of those saying, had Gillum not won the Democratic primary, I truly think Gwen Graham, if she hadn't beaten DeSantis,
awesome, yeah.
I mean, you got to remember how razor thin close even the Gillum race was. And Gillum was a Bernie bro.
All right. I get it. We'll get into all this. Matt Caldwell, the governor, and as big as a fan as I am, I wish sometimes he would explain things just a little bit more in depth. When he says, and he's said things before, hey, Byron hasn't been there in the game, Amendments 3, Amendments 4, which I haven't seen many people talk about if they think that's an issue. But having said that, the governor has said that he thinks that this state could always turn around and go back purple. And now it wouldn't go back purple if you look at the amount of registered Republicans versus Dem, but kind of read between the lines. Is he talking about he thinks the state could go back purple based on the amount of independents that could swing an election? If that's the case, what issue would bring the independents to vote for the Democrats? I mean, the war in Iran, I get all that, the high cost of gasoline, and maybe the property insurance. But I mean, is it possible that Florida could become a purple state again?
Oh, it's absolutely possible. In fact, I would say we still are a purple state. As
Really?
as you alluded to, look, the Republican share of the electorate hasn't really moved over the last 15 years, at least last 10 years. Republicans statewide are about 40% of the electorate. What's collapsed is the Democrats. They have lost 10, 15%, and it's all gone to NPAs. So Democrats effectively are in third place, and it's really a contest between the Republicans and the independents / NPAs. There is no party that has a majority, an outright 50% plus majority of the vote share. And so it is really likely that it's going to be a close election in November. And I don't think it's fair. What happened in 2022 coming out of COVID, nobody can replicate that. Nobody's ever done that. And I credit to Governor DeSantis for taking the positions he did on the policies that mattered and voters cared about. But any person who had taken that position and been given that opportunity would have been rewarded if they'd followed that platform. You go back and look, as Matt was talking about, in 2018, Governor DeSantis won with less than 50% of the vote. Rick Scott, in his first term in 2010, less than 50% of the vote. I've got to go back, and I don't remember in 98 where
Why don't we go back to 1960 while we're at it, which I don't recall anything that happened back then.
You're talking about the Bush versus McKay, right?
Matt O'Hearn, James Fishback, there is an underground support. I'm telling you, I went to go see one of my doctors a couple weeks ago, and young gal, classy, professional nursing assistant was in there as they were, just making sure everything was fine with me, and found out what it did. She goes, "What do you think about James Fishback?" I mean, this girl could have been more 24, 25, knew everything. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's a boatload of for like an underground sector, or I should say under the radar for James Fishback. Here's what Fishback said recently, a couple months ago. He called Donalds a DEI hire. I'm like, what? Because a majority of white people, by the way, voted for Donalds in his congressional district.
Right. Naples is not right.
Byron Donalds was a white guy. He wouldn't be in Congress.
Yeah, I don't believe if he were a white guy, he'd be in Congress. I believe he's a DEI hire. There's nothing special about him. I've heard those conversations with folks in Washington, D.C. and in Tallahassee, that he is our guy. He's kind of the token black guy, moved up the ranks when a lot of other people who are highly qualified would not be in that position if they were.
Okay, he got elected by a solid majority of Republicans and by a district down the Naples area that's predominantly white. I'm just being honest here.
Right.
Matt O'Hearn, how do you call him a DEI hire? But is Fishback even plausible, or is it even valid in this race?
No, he reminds me. And I hate to lump in Ron Paul because I don't want anyone to associate Ron Paul with that kind of language when it involves racial things. But you talk about a vocal minority, and I think that he's a perfect example of you can win 1 million online polls and have a very loud, enthusiastic small pocket in your corner, but at the end of the day, that's not going to be loud enough to persuade the bulk.
Well, wait a second, Matt Caldwell, what's the attractiveness that people are finding out about Fishback? What is it?
I think just the fact that he's brash, outspoken, obnoxious. He's willing to do the thing. Here's the thing that so many candidates get wrong about Trump. They think that they can mimic Trump, and the only thing that they mimic is Trump's willingness to be outrageous. Trump is also actually funny. Trump actually does have some positions that he's carried a through line on for 30, 40 years. So you don't question that he just came to those conclusions. Agree with him or disagree with him, he's got consistent policy points. He can be funny, and he works that into his routine. The only thing that these mimicry candidates have is that they are outrageous and they're rude, and they don't have anything else to add to the mix that appeals to the rest of the electorate. At least that's been my observation. The whole idea that Byron's a DEI hire. This is my congressman right now in my district in Southwest Florida. This is literally one of the most conservative corners of America.
Right.
And I've always pointed out just how much it pushes back against the Democratic narrative against us. We've got a female state Senate president comes out of this area. We've got a Black Republican congressman. We've got Hispanic representation. So it is majority white. It's as typical as you might think of. But we've elected literally everybody that you could imagine electing out of this district.
Lindsey, the issue of school choice, sometimes, unless it's a hot issue pertaining to a current situation, like immigration was a big issue in 2024. Now Republicans do better, but it's not the issue that it was a couple of years ago. But when you do something about it, I think it's bragging rights. Like a mayor can bring down crime. They run for re-election. A lot of times people will vote that individual back in because crime's always an issue. I like the issue of school choice. That's right up your alley with the charter schools that you're involved with and everything else. This is something that would be a piece that would represent Paul Renner. Absolutely. And I like a lot what Renner has to say. He's raising money, but I don't know. Maybe it's because you got a couple of the candidates. You would think he's not gaining that much traction where he should be.
Right. I completely agree. I mean, school choice is one of my number one issues for obvious reasons. I'm a mom. I think it's really important. I mean, we're leading the country with school choice reforms, and it's wonderful. It's providing so many more options for our families here in Florida and so many better options for our students. However, I do think that the war chest just isn't there for Renner, even though he was the one leading the charge when he was Speaker of the House for so many of these things. He still helps us on different issues and really is just such an advocate. Like, he really does so much in Tallahassee behind the scenes that we don't even know. And so I think that is probably, to me, my happiest moment when I heard that Paul Renner was going to run was just because he loves school choice and he's such a fighter for it. However, he doesn't have the war chest. He doesn't have, I would say, even that with Donald, he's always on Fox News. He has such name ID, and he's been doing that for years and years and years. So Paul Renner just doesn't have it, and so I think it's a hindrance to him.
The Jay Collins campaign. Matt Caldwell, lieutenant governor, military. He's been on our show, my radio show, plenty of times. And I just got to tell you, I was talking with some friends who well, lobbyists that love Jay, support Jay, but they're like, man, he's not gaining any traction. And I wonder, Jay would run for maybe a congressional race. I think he could win or whatever, but one of the things, and I didn't want to play all these other clips, and some people will differ with me, when the lieutenant governor can talk about issues, and then instead he talks about personal campaign members of Byron's campaign, and people who, I'm just going to be honest with you, nobody cares about. No, I mean, it's not like somebody was on Epstein Island. I'm talking, who I'm talking about, Matt Caldwell. I mean, former campaign staff, and this is an issue. I mean, I got news for you. In 2020, people weren't cared about the Hunter Biden issue. I don't care what you believe, they weren't. In 2024, people didn't care about, I mean, I don't think he should have had classified documents, but the voters just overlooked that. They didn't give a flip about Trump and his tax returns. The bottom line is it was just bad economy. They weren't happy the way the Democrats were running things. That's the way it is. In many cases, that's the way it should be. But somehow Collins just, I mean, for crying out loud, the guy that brought him on board won't even endorse him.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the biggest hang up for Jay. When you get picked to be lieutenant governor, clearly with the intention of elevating him to run for governor, and then there's no backup support, that leaves a huge question mark over the whole thing. And that's really what you got to ask yourself. If Jay had not been picked to be lieutenant governor, would he be running for governor? And I don't think anybody thinks that's the case. And if you got to corner Jay, again, all respect to his service, all respect to the issues he worked on, the nonprofit. He came down and helped us out in Southwest Florida after Hurricane Ian, cooking food for weeks on end. But at the end of the day, if you're going to run for governor, you got to have a sensibility that voters can pick up on. They can sense that this is really what you wanted to do and what you want as a passion project. And it just doesn't come across that that's the case.
All right, Matt O'Hearn, is it done? I mean, we're not going to see. I mean,
Well,
next month is when you got to have qualifying.
yeah.
We're not seeing anybody else jump in a GOP primary. This is done, right?
No, I think it's done. Well, I think it's done, but I don't think we're going to see anyone else jump in. Casey, I think if she were going to, she would have done so by now.
Yeah.
But Matt Caldwell's point about DeSantis not endorsing, I found that so bizarre because what is DeSantis waiting for? If we know he doesn't like Byron Donalds, so he should have, in my opinion, picked a side, either Renner or Collins. But if he had picked Renner, that would have looked like he was going against his own confidence. So I'm so curious as to what happened there, what kind of rift there was, other than DeSantis just thinking, well, maybe Casey may get in. I did want to touch on one other thing, though, and with all due respect to Matt's take on Jay not really having the passion, I don't think Donalds excites people. I just don't. I mean, I know he's Trump's pick, and he's kind of he walks up to the podium with kind of a strut when he speaks at Trump rallies. He does a pretty good job, but I don't see a wave of enthusiasm for him the way that you saw for DeSantis, for example, running for re-election. And I do think that the enthusiasm gap could play a role. If Byron Donalds loses in the general, other than people being fed up with high cost of living and things like that, I honestly think it'll be because just of discontentment from GOP voters.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they're going to stay home, if anything else. I think that there's just been, I think on the MAGA side, people went in to the 2024 election like we got to take our country back. And I think that things are not the way that, at least for me, that I thought that they were going to go. Not happy about it. Not happy the direction that we're taking just with foreign policy alone. And I think that's going to hurt the midterm significantly, and it's going to hurt GOP voters from getting out there. And midterms are always lower than the regular general. So I think it's going to hurt just the chances of a Republican taking the governor's.
Matt Caldwell, I had Skylar Zander with advisor with Americans for Prosperity Action. I've known Skylar, and then you've known him for a long time. We've known him. He's been on our show many times. Skylar's probably one of the top analysis or analysts that I listen to. I mean, he's like a reporter. And he was on with my radio show this past week. And I said, as we talked about a few moments ago, everybody always writes off independent voters. And we use this like it one size fits all, that independents are socially liberal and moderately conservative. And he goes, Ed, and by the way, Skylar's group, they knock on doors. I mean, they knock on independents, Republicans, and Democrats. I mean, they knew that Trump was going to win in the wintertime of 2015. I remember, real quick, before I get to my point, I was telling everybody this story before. I was embedded with this group, and in 2015, I mean, they're knocking on doors of Republicans and independents, and Republicans are like, I know Trump's not a conservative. I know, but I'm so sick and tired of Mitch McConnell. I'm just voting for Trump as a protest vote. Boom, you saw what happened. There was that wave out there. And Skylar says, if you look at the independents, he says, you can't really say, it's almost like the average voter, Matt, that the one size fits all. He says, if you're in North Florida, Jacksonville, Tallahassee, on the Republican side, he goes, you're going to find more conservatives as you find more moderates in South Florida. He says the same thing as with independents. Independents in North Florida, very moderate. He goes, you get down to the Orlando area, forget about it. They're very liberal, which is like the stereotype. And again, you've got to address that. And you look at some of the previous elections, even throughout the country, where you've got some swing areas, the independents are breaking pretty heavily for the Democrats, Matt Caldwell.
They are, and the independents, calling them a single group, particularly in a state as big as Florida, doesn't really work. What they are typically disaffected with the majority in their neighborhood. So if independents in Orlando are disaffected Democrats, particularly, as you just pointed out, they're more progressive, they're more liberal. They think the Democrats in power are squishes. And you come down to my neighborhood, our independents, they think that all of the conservatives are squishes, and we need to be more hardcore. They're disaffected in the other direction. That's the through line with independents, particularly in Florida, is they're disaffected with party politics. The question, I think, for the general election, for when we as Republicans took control of the majority in the House and the Senate and the governor's mansion back in the late 90s, the main selling point was competence. If we were not the majority party, we were convincing Democrats and independents to put us in charge. And what we pitched was, we are more competent. We will run the state better. We will fix the problems in education. We will fix the problems with tax policy. You may not agree with us in the majority on our position on abortion or on marriage, but you want to put us in charge because we're going to make sure the trains run on time. If we can't convey that message, then it goes back to, where are we on abortion, on marriage, on the social issues? And the majority of voters, let's just be honest, aren't as conservative. They're certainly not as conservative as I am. And I think if you look at the statewide spread, it's not as conservative as where the party is in terms of the control, in terms of the members that are representing things right now.
Well, sorry, you brought up a good point I want to bring up real quick. As far as the Republican platform for this midterm, there's no more scapegoats. You can't blame Sleepy Joe. You can't blame the economy on Sleepy Joe. This is Trump's economy.
That's true.
You can't say we're going to fix immigration. Well, you're the ones in charge of immigration.
Yep.
So you could pick the topic, and the
Gas
problem
prices.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, and you could pick any of them, and I think that's the biggest liability for Republicans is what are you going to campaign on? What are you going to fix? Because all the things you said you were going to fix are just as bad as they were a year ago and 2 years ago. And I honestly think, to what Matt was saying earlier about independents in Florida and disaffection, I don't see Republicans reversing that trend within 6 months. 6 months is a long time in politics, but I don't see there being enough time.
Property insurance is still the top tier issue, Lindsey.
Even if the Iran war stops
Right.
this month, when people go into that booth, they're going to know that basically, even if it stops this month and Trump claims victory or whatever, it's kind of like a janitor creating a big mess and then cleaning it up and saying, I'm the world's best janitor. I mean, that's really how people are going to look at it.
But Lindsey, it's still going to be more than just beyond gas prices. The two other areas that we're not talking about is Obamacare, which has driven up everything. We kicked the can down the road on that. And then outside the gas prices, the one that's even bigger than that is grocery prices. Listen, I pray that the war in Iran gets done very quickly. Gasoline prices are dropped down, but you still got to address grocery prices, and that's even worse than the gas costs, many people say.
Absolutely. Well, people are having a hard time feeding their families. Credit card, just the use of credit cards is sky high. That's because people can't afford it, and it's a problem. Housing prices are a fortune. I mean, I've talked to several people just in the last couple weeks. They're in their 20s. They can't afford a home. They don't know when they're going to be able to ever afford a home. So they're renting for the next however many years. That's a problem when you're looking at long-term stability for a nation and having people bought in to the country, the state, your community, et cetera. Because strong communities, they have strong families, and you are committed to making that place better.
The average home buyer age now is 40, used to be 20.
It's insane.
Well, yeah, and default rates are going through the roof. Wall Street Journal pointed that out. Matt Caldwell, real quick on the whole issue of the economy. It's about price. It's not about jobs. You got jobs out there, but it is about the economy and the dynamics. And we're saying, listen, I've seen things slow down in the economy, and Republicans are still able to win. So it could happen for a win for the Republicans in Florida in 2026.
Yeah, I still think the Republicans are in good shape to win in 26. I don't think in Florida we're at risk of actually losing unless somebody does something really dumb. But nationally, I think everybody's concluded, even with all the redistricting wars, we probably will lose the House because the mood just is not in favor of the incumbent party. Hopefully they can hold on to the Senate. But it is not going to be a slam dunk election cycle. And you've got to have something to campaign on. As Matt was saying, what is the thesis, not just for you and your individual campaign, but what's the thesis for the whole movement, right? For the entire party. That's when you see where things are falling apart. when messaging starts to become very specific for each individual candidate, and they're not riding with the party slogans. They're focusing on how they're going to win their race because they're just trying to keep from getting swept up in the wave.
Matt Caldwell, I'm glad you took the time today. Matt O'Hearn, I'm glad you made the time today as well. Good discussion.
Always enjoy it.
Yeah, man. And we're gonna get you guys back on here again real quick. And it's a good one. I mean, we didn't go too deep into the weeds on this race. I'd like to see some debates happen. I hope Byron does them. But listen, I don't endorse in these races. As a free market conservative, I endorse solutions and ideas. But Matt O'Hearn's right. I mean, I like Jay. Jay doesn't maybe entertain everybody. I get it. Renner's kicked it up a notch. I got to tell you that. Fishback's entertaining. Byron, again, he's the front runner. But I will say this, Lindsey, he doesn't. As one of my buddies says, he goes, he doesn't make my golf swing go straight.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing recently. And I mean, he's so good on television. Like, he's very articulate. So I do think I would love to see debates too. What I really want to know is, what are the track record? What's the track record for all these people? Fishback doesn't have one as far as voting record. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's appealing to young voters, is because he's an outsider, kind of like what Trump was. He's an outsider. So it's going to be really interesting, but I would love to kind of line up all of them and just have a debate and have them go at it. It'd be really entertaining.
Little thing of advice. I'm not talking about being John McCain, but to Congressman Donalds, it doesn't hurt as a conservative Republican. It doesn't hurt to differ with your party from time to time. I do it all the time in my radio show, and it doesn't hurt. You're not going to burn an eternity for differing with your president and with some things. And I mean, you can always, again, my dad used to say, sometimes a disagreement is a disagreement, but it's not as bad depending on your tone. You can have a slight disagreement, but keep the tone professional.
Nice.
Not like, hey, you're a filthy scumbag, I want to vote against you, all that kind of stuff. And I think Byron could possibly, because there will be a blue wave out there, depending whatever the size. I'm just saying, I think the congressman could say, hey, this is where I probably differ from some of the Republicans on spending, and like Governor DeSantis has done, and you see his numbers go through the roof.
Yeah. Well, he should do that just based on some of the decisions Trump has made recently. I think that would actually make him more appealing to voters.
Yeah. I mean, it did wonders for other stuff. So,
yeah.
And other candidates. All right, Lindsey Randall, Ahmed Dean, don't forget, go to our YouTube page. I know everybody's been going to Florida Daily, and we appreciate it. But go to our YouTube page, type in Florida Daily Show, like it, subscribe to it. It doesn't cost anything. It just means you like it, and you'll get notifications and all that kind of stuff. And you can catch my radio show as well throughout the week. All right, Lindsey, we'll be doing another edition coming up here real soon. The Florida Daily Show right here on FloridaDaily.com.